please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Plaster, please call the roll.
Commissioner Nava?
Here.
Commissioner Mill?
Here.
Commissioner Dremel?
Here.
Commissioner Casey?
Here.
Commissioner Schmolke?
Here.
Commissioner Rania?
Here.
Chair Schwartz?
Here. Thank you. All right, our first order of business this evening is to adopt our agenda.
Motion to adopt? Second.
Motion by Schmolke, second by Casey. Any additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the agenda is adopted. Next, we have approval of the minutes of our January 16th, 2025 meeting.
Chair Schwartz,
Mr. Knobloch,
I move that we approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Second.
motion by Knobloch, second by No. Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the minutes are approved. All right, our case for the evening is planning case 24-8, a flexibility request for a building addition at 360 Coon Rapids Boulevard Northwest, Brickwol Services. Mr. Platzner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. The applicant, I did speak to them earlier this week, and they said that they were planning on being here tonight. So seeing as there's no one in the audience, I might check with them after the meeting and make sure everything's all right, but I do think that they were planning on being here originally. So they might show up in the middle of this presentation, we'll see. But I do have before you a request for design flexibility for overhead doors and loading area facing Coon Rapids Boulevard at 360 Coon Rapids Boulevard. And this is part of the IDC automatic expansion project. And this is hopefully the last request related to that project coming from the applicant there. I know it's been almost a year of working on this project. But this is an addition to what was approved back in the summer, an expansion to the building on the IDC automatic garage door manufacturing and distribution building there on Coon Rapids Boulevard. The addition is proposed to be modified by the applicant a little bit, and this is in response to Coon Creek Watershed District requirements for drainage on the back of the property, so kind of the southwest end of the property. The applicant is proposing to move one of the approved sections of the addition that was originally attached to the building and detach it from the building, make it a detached structure on the site, and then flip it so that the overhead doors of this detached building face Coon Rapids Boulevard. And the applicant has determined that this is really one of the only ways that they are able to meet the Coon Creek Watershed District requirements, which is why this is a change so late in the planning process. So this site is within the Port Evergreen zoning district and the River Rapids overlay. And I'll show you here what's being changed. So the very southern part of the addition, the small, I believe it's 20,000 square foot section of the addition is being proposed to, I'm sorry, 20,000 square foot isn't right. 2,000 square foot, I apologize. Off by an order of magnitude, is being proposed to be no longer attached to the building and rotated as shown on the second slide here on the very southern corner of the site, basically as far back as it can be. And this accessory building is proposed to be about 320 feet setback from the Coon Rapids Boulevard right-of-way. So essentially the largest setback that would be achievable on this site. And for context, the rest of the building addition, the main section on the north end of the site, is about 50 feet setback from Coon Rapids Boulevard. And so the applicant is proposing to orient the building this way in order to maintain truck circulation around the site while still meeting the watershed district requirements. So truck circulation would still be possible on the site with any trucks entering the site for pickup and drop off the same way they generally would have on the north end, and then moving along the back of the site. and exiting the site on the south or eastern end of the site. The main loading area for deliveries is still behind the building. So this building proposed here is generally for equipment storage, for equipment that's being used on site, rather than for deliveries or shipments. So there's, the applicant doesn't believe that there will be truck traffic using this site or very much activity in terms of using this section of the site as a loading zone. Generally, this would just be a storage for equipment that's being used on site. So the loading zone is still behind the building and almost entirely screened by the building. So these are the elevations that the applicant provided, showing what the accessory building would look like from the south and then from directly head-on from Coon Rapids Boulevard in the east. So it is difficult kind of to show how much more setback it is than the rest of the building. On the bottom image there, on the very right side, that addition there is set back 50 feet from the boulevard, whereas on the far left side, it's set back 320 feet from the boulevard. So it's quite a big difference, but it does show those overhead doors facing Coon Rapids Boulevard. In the River Rapids overlay district, it does explicitly say that overhead doors are not to face Coon Rapids Boulevard. So it is very specific about that, hence the requirement that the applicant ask for flexibility. And for a little bit more context, generally a change like this would be something that would be allowed through administrative approval. So in the port districts and in the River Rapids overlay, any change that constitutes less than 15% of the site or 15% of the building does not need to go through the entire planning process and be approved by the Planning Commission or City Council, but it's something that can be approved through a building permit. What's being proposed here does constitute less than 15% of the site. However, they do need Planning Commission and City Council approval for the flexibility request to have overhead doors facing Coon Rapids Boulevard. The applicant did say that they would be unable to bring in material samples today, so I did just want to include a slide showing kind of generally what the building exterior material would be. Aside from the overhead doors themselves, which would be black or gray steel, they're proposing a stone mimicking IFAS facade, which would be sand pebble texture and grizzle gray color. So essentially, it would mimic gray stone, especially from a distance. And right here on the right is an example of IFAS mimicking stone. What's proposed would not have the multicolor facade that's shown here, but the gray would probably look similar to what's being proposed in the exterior of the building. And then lastly, I just took a Google Maps screenshot of the building before any of the addition that was approved this summer began construction, just to show generally where on the site the building proposed would be located. So I've circled that. It would be a little bit further back than the building just to the right of that circle, or the section of the building just to the right of that circle. That's an attached part of the building. So that gives a little bit of context to what the proposed addition would look like from Coon Rapids Boulevard. With that, city staff are recommending approval of the design flexibility request for overhead doors in a loading area to face Coon Rapids Boulevard, with the condition that no outdoor storage of equipment is permitted on site, which is already a requirement in the Port District, but sometimes I do like to include recommended conditions just to emphasize certain elements of the code that we want to make sure that they're absolutely meeting. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Platzner. Commission, any questions for Mr. Platzner?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Schmokey.
Mr. Placer, could you just go back to the slide really quick where they have the color material?
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear, the red, darker gray, lighter gray, that's not what's being proposed, correct? That's just to show how the gray will look, and your sample on the left is the color sample, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I have a comment. I walked the site with the gentleman today, and there's a couple things that sort of struck me. First of all, the type of businesses there, you've got over 50 parking stalls for them, and it's got an office that's probably maybe 100 square feet, no traffic. The other thing that struck me was they have to put in-ground retention thing, and there seemed to be enough space to put a retention pond in, even though they have one now. To offset this, they have to put it in the underground, And yet, you look at the size and the space it's going to take to do the underground would be almost enough to do the surface. And this added expense to these businesses for this, I look at it, it's sort of like, it's a 50-50 proposition. I know they've got rules on square footage and the amount of water that runs off, and you've got to be able to store it. But we do have a very high sand content in Anoka. And those are the two comments I had from that. As far as the building, it's almost invisible from either of the roads that are around it. It's around the back, plus there's a new building going in just west of it, that one that's under construction, that is also going to hide the structure here. Like you said, most of it is going to be for storage for their equipment, which isn't very big. And we're talking skid loader size things. But the two things I found that were kind of odd were the retention, not have been able to put a retention pond in, and the amount of parking places that were there for the type of business that is located there. They might have been able to jockey the two to end up with a surface retention pond with a little less parking, so. The gentleman did say he was going to be here tonight, but maybe I kept him too long. That's all.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I might be able to provide some responses.
Mr. Platzner?
Thank you. In terms of the watershed requirements, I am not able to speak to that, only because I don't know the details of exactly what the watershed requires and why, but I do know that the applicant absolutely has to meet the requirement of putting that extra filtration in on site. As far as the parking goes, the site does actually have the minimum number of parking spaces, almost exactly, that are required for an industrial use. So the addition of the warehouse addition on the west side of the building did bring them up to essentially requiring the number of parking spaces that they do have on site. So regardless of how many workers are actually going in and out of that section of the industrial building each day, the city code does require parking spaces by square footage for that building. So I don't think there would be an option for the applicant to reduce the number of parking spaces on site without also coming and getting approval from the Planning Commission and Council for that.
Thank you. Commission, any other questions for Mr. Platzner at this time? All right. We need a public hearing in this matter, so at this time, I'll open a public hearing in planning case 24-8, flexibility request for a building addition at 360 Coon Rapids Boulevard Northwest, Brickwol Services. Anyone wish to speak to this public hearing? Seeing no one in the audience, I will close the public hearing, limit comments to commission. Commission, your thoughts?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Casey.
it seems to me that this is minimally impactful, that it's kind of a, I'm not going to say bookkeeping, kind of thing to address, but it seems minimally impactful. I'm sure they didn't anticipate some kind of ruling coming from the watershed district, so I'm in favor of it, to let them go ahead and make the best of their circumstances.
Chair Schwartz.
Commissioner Knobloch.
I have a question for planner Patzner. In regards to the overhead door issue and the flexibility being asked, did you come up with a percentage or amount of square feet that is being asked for in the design flexibility?
Commissioner Knobloch, no, I tend to look at this particular ordinance as a yes or a no. It's basically the ordinance is in the design section of the River Rapids overlay as an aesthetic requirement, disallowing overhead doors facing Coon Rapids Boulevard. So the way I would look at it would be, rather than allowing a certain percentage of the building to have overhead doors, the flexibility request would just be to flip that no to a yes.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up, how many feet is it from the Coon Rapids Boulevard again?
320.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Schmokey.
I'll make a motion that in planning case 24-8, that we recommend approval of the design flexibility to City Code Section 11-1003.11. Do I need to cite the whole thing? Parentheses, 18, et cetera, to allow overhead doors and loading area to face Coon Rapids Boulevard. Finding the modifications are necessary to respond to site conditions, result in better integration of uses or additional public amenities, and further the intent of the Port District, subject to the following condition, which is that there would be no outdoor storage of equipment will be permitted on that site.
I'll second that.
Motion by Schmokey, second by Knobloch. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. This is a recommendation by the Planning Commission with a decision by the City Council at their April 1st meeting. All right. I guess we move on to other business. Mr. Platzner, anything for other business?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners. So we do have a work session scheduled after this, which will be in Conference Room 1. So once I want to go over just a couple development updates really quickly, just for the interest of the Planning Commission, and then we can move on over to Conference Room 1, just through this door here, and begin the work session. So just to go through some updates really quickly on recent approvals. The Holly Street Industrial Project are moving forward with building permit review. So this is the other industrial building recently approved in this section of the Coon Rapids Boulevard corridor, just outside of the Port Evergreen, this is within the Port Evergreen District, near the IDC Automatic Addition. The University Avenue Rental Townhome application for University and Butternut Streets did receive approval from the City Council. They still need to go forward with their final plat, but they did receive preliminary plat and PUD approval. The Coon Creek Commons proposal, which is 20 townhome and multifamily units on Zion Street, have received final plat approval, and they're still working on some of their agreement documents before they go forward with building permit applications. The Coon Rapids Strip Mall at Crooked Lake Boulevard and Coon Rapids Boulevard, which was approved back in 2023, are finally planning to go forward with building permit applications this spring, and so they have reached out about that in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully that will be going forward this spring as planned. And pretty much the same story for Sweet Senior Living, which was a senior living development which was approved back in 2023 at Coon Rapids Boulevard near Norway Street. They're also planning on going forward this spring. And that's all I have for you in terms of development updates. So we can, at the pleasure of the commission or of the chair, adjourn to the work session. Thank you.
And any word on next month's meeting?
Actually, I'm going to defer to Planner Behringer. We do have an application in, but I'm not sure if that's something that we're going to hear at the April meeting or if we're going to push that to May.
Thank you, Max. Commission, we did receive an application from Mr. Alan Butler. He has 4 properties on East River Road, right off East River Road, 95th Lane, just south of 610. So he's looking at combining those properties and starting a assisted living complex or campus, which would be licensed to the state. It is a conditional use in that area. He did submit an application for CUP last Monday. It was deemed incomplete. We gave him until Friday to submit the missing items, and he did not meet that deadline. So just getting a letter out to him tomorrow, kind of informing him of the next steps and that the 60-day clock has not started since it's deemed incomplete. So at the earliest, we would be looking at getting that completed by April 7th, I believe it is, for the May Planning Commission meeting. Thank you.
So the plan is to not have a meeting in April for the Planning Commission.
All right, thank you. Commission, anybody have anything for other business?
Move to adjourn?
Second?
Motion by Casey, second by Schmolke. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.